Welcome to the Phil and H Travel Podcast. Is it worth it?
Glad to be here.
Imagine, for a second, an entire sovereign nation just agreeing to turn off all its lights at the exact same time. Like every street lamp, every porch light, every storefront.
Right.
And then imagine waking up the very next morning, taking a boat out, and slipping into ocean water that is so clear it literally feels like outer space. And then coming face to face with a 40-ton wild humpback whale.
Yeah. I mean, it honestly sounds like a fabricated tourism brochure, you know, or some heavily engineered private island experience.
Totally, but it's not.
No, it isn't. It is an actual living community that is currently grappling with some of the most intense geographical and, frankly, logistical constraints on the entire planet.
And those constraints are exactly what we are dissecting today in this deep dive, because we are looking at Niue.
Which is fascinating.
It really is. It's a world's first dark sky nation. It's a raised coral atoll in the South Pacific, and it has a population of just 1,500 people.
Barely a small town.
Right. We are talking about a destination with fewer than 50 rooms available across the entire island. And get this, only 2 flights a week connecting it to the rest of the world.
Which creates a massive bottleneck.
Huge. So I'm going to lay out the full picture for you today. Flights from Auckland start at about $522 USD round trip, but your daily budgets, those are going to swing wildly, anywhere from $85 to $255 USD.
Depending entirely on how you travel.
Exactly. We are going to look at the absolute best and worst times to go. And let me tell you, if you aren't aiming for July through October for the whales and the dry weather, you really need to hear what you are walking into.
You definitely do.
We also have to warn you about 3 brutal logistics traps today. One of them is a massive accommodation trap. Basically, if you haven't booked your bed months in advance, you simply are not getting on this island. Period. But my ultimate goal today is to answer the underlying question, do the humpback swimming, the cave snorkeling, and this supposedly unprecedented stargazing actually justify the immense, frustrating effort it takes to get there?
It's the million-dollar question.
Right. So we're going to cover every single budget tier and traveler type to give you the ultimate honest verdict by the end of this.
I think the premise of Niue represents one of the most fascinating macro tourism case studies on Earth right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you are approaching this with a lot of well-deserved enthusiasm for the wildlife and the sky, which is great, but we really have to ground all of that excitement in the sheer physical limitations of the island.
Because it's not easy.
No, this isn't a place that bends to the will of the modern traveler.
Well, let's test that. Because when I was digging into the source material, the claims they make are just massive.
They are.
First, Niue is the only country where it is legally permitted to swim face-to-face with wild humpback whales in open water.
Which is incredible on its own.
Right, and then they pair that with being the world's first dark sky nation. And I actually have to push back on that second claim immediately.
Oh, why is that?
Because it is incredibly easy for a tourism board to just slap a dark sky label on a marketing campaign, Just because they happen to be located out in the middle of the ocean, how on earth do you coordinate an entire country to actually achieve this?
You're definitely right to be skeptical there, because dark sky is thrown around so casually by a lot of remote destinations.
Yeah, exactly.
But in this case, it is not a self-appointed marketing slogan. The accreditation actually comes from the International Dark Sky Association, and it covers the entire 259 square kilometer landmass.
Wait, the whole island?
The whole island. The mechanism behind getting that approval requires verified, rigorously measured light pollution data over an extended period.
Wow.
Yeah, the government actually had to retrofit street lighting and coordinate island-wide protocols just to ensure artificial light doesn't bleed into the atmosphere.
See, I'm trying to wrap my head around the logistics of that. I've lived in apartments where I couldn't get 3 roommates to agree on a thermostat setting, let alone getting an entire population to agree on light discipline. But I guess when you only have 1,500 residents, that level of civic coordination actually becomes possible?
It does.
It's essentially just a small town that happens to be a sovereign state.
Exactly. The population size is the primary enabler for that coordination. But it is also the root cause of the island's severe logistical bottleneck.
How so?
Because it is so small, the infrastructure to support visitors barely exists. Like, let's look at the actual pipeline to get there. You have a single runway.
Right.
You have one airline, Air New Zealand, that's willing to fly there. They operate 2 flights a week.
Just 2.
Just 2. When you land, there is 0 public transport. And then you hit the hardest physical ceiling of all the 50-room limit.
Yeah, let's put a pin in those 50 rooms for a second, because first I want to challenge the accessibility.
Okay, go ahead.
The sources, quote, these flights running between $522 and $1,100 USD round trip. And on paper, $522 really isn't terrible for a remote Pacific flight.
It's not bad at all.
But there's a massive geographic catch. That price is only from Auckland.
Precisely. Auckland basically operates as a forced single artery funnel for the entire world.
Right. So if you are listening to this deep dive in Chicago or London or even Sydney, you can't just route through Fiji or Hawaii.
No, you can't.
You have to endure this massive multi-leg journey just to reach the Auckland bottleneck before you even begin the final leg to Niue.
Which adds up.
It adds thousands of dollars and dozens of transit hours before the official trip even begins. And once you finally get there, you aren't even rewarded with a traditional tropical beach.
Which is a fundamental misunderstanding many travelers have.
Yeah.
Niue is a raised coral limestone plateau.
So no sandy shores.
Right. The geological mechanism here is fascinating. You essentially have an ancient coral reef that tectonic forces have violently pushed upward out of the ocean floor.
Oh, wow.
And over millennia, the softer parts of the limestone dissolve from rainfall, leaving behind this incredibly jagged, razor-sharp terrain.
So the island literally has no sand to offer you.
It doesn't have the geological material to create long, sweeping white sand beaches. What you get instead are deep, dramatic chasms, towering sea caves, and tidal pools that are carved straight into the rock.
Okay, so you have an island with no beaches, a brutal transit bottleneck, and a hard cap of 50 rooms.
Yeah.
And yet the macroeconomics and the sources show this incredible tension. Like, in 2024, the island's economy grew by a very healthy 3.8%.
That's solid growth.
All right. But then the forecast shows that growth completely falling off a cliff, crashing down to just 0.4% by 2026.
That's a huge drop.
So if they are staring down the barrel of an economic stall like that, why don't they just build a massive 300-room Marriott and solve the problem overnight?
Because the physical reality of the island just prevents it. I mean, look at the logistics of building a commercial resort there. Every single steel beam, every sheet of drywall, every bag of cement, and every piece of heavy machinery has to be shipped across the open ocean to a tiny port that can barely handle large vessels, or flown in on those 2 weekly passenger jets.
That sounds impossibly expensive.
It is. And then who builds it? You have a total population of 1,500 people. There is basically no surplus labor force.
They literally cannot afford the logistical overhead of mass construction.
Exactly. They are in a trap. They desperately need the economic injection that comes from visitor spending.
Yeah.
I mean, tourism arrivals are still 32% below 2019 levels.
Wow.
But they physically cannot capture more of that tourism revenue without building more rooms, which they do not have the resources to build.
So this means, as a traveler, you are walking into an environment defined entirely by scarcity.
Yeah.
You aren't just picking dates based on when you can get time off work.
No, not at all.
You are fighting for a slot in a severely restricted timeline. The sources make it clear that choosing when to visit Niue is a rigid binary switch. There is no shoulder season compromise here.
The biological clock of the wildlife and the meteorological reality of the Pacific basically dictate the terms.
Right.
If you look at the peak window, from July through October, you are operating under a very specific set of conditions.
Yeah, this is the golden window for the whales.
Exactly.
The southern hemisphere humpbacks migrate thousands of miles from the freezing waters of Antarctica, specifically to use Niue's waters as a nursery.
It's amazing.
Because the water here is deep, it's warm, and it's protected from open ocean predators. And because we just established that Niue is a solid rock of raised limestone, there are no rivers.
And no rivers means no mud.
Right. No mud or sediment washing into the ocean after a rainstorm. So the water visibility sits at an astonishing 50 to 70 meters.
That is just incredible.
It is. That is over 200 feet of crystal clear line of sight.
Add to that the prevailing trade winds during these months, which keep the temperature at a very comfortable 25 degrees Celsius. And you have ideal surface conditions.
Perfect weather.
Yeah. If the primary purpose of your trip is to be in the water with a humpback whale, July through October is just non-negotiable.
But what happens when that window closes? Let's say a listener is trying to save some money, and they look at flights in, like, November or March.
Well, they are stepping into the off-peak, or wet season, which runs from November through April. And the entire mechanism of the island's weather shifts.
Not in a good way, I assume.
No.
Yeah.
The reliable trade winds die down, leading to a spike in oppressive humidity. But more critically, the cyclone risk becomes a genuine threat.
And the rain isn't just an inconvenience, right? It actually breaks the infrastructure.
It really does. Those dramatic chasms and caves you want to explore. The tracks leading to them are mostly unpaved limestone dirt.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so under heavy, sustained tropical rain, they turn into impassable mud. Furthermore, the shift in weather patterns alters the ocean swells.
So the water gets rough.
Exactly. The sea caves and tidal pools can suffer from what surfers call closing out, meaning the wave energy pushes directly into the pools.
That sounds dangerous.
It makes them violently dangerous to enter for days at a time. The island effectively locks you out of its best natural assets.
So I imagine the only real defense for traveling during the wet season is the budget. Because if the whales are gone and the weather is hostile, this must be when you can score those 522 USD flights from Auckland.
You can secure the cheaper flights, sure, and finding one of the 50 rooms becomes marginally easier. But you have to be incredibly careful of the holiday squeeze.
Oh, let me guess. People assume December in the Southern Hemisphere is summer, so they try to book a Christmas vacation.
That is the exact trap. December and January sit right in the middle of the wet season. The weather is poor, the whales are gone.
Right.
But because of the school holidays in Australia and New Zealand, and crucially, Niue and expatriates returning home to visit family for Christmas, the flight demand just skyrockets.
So the rooms fill up anyway.
That tiny inventory of 50 rooms drops back down to zero. You end up paying peak prices for the absolute worst seasonal experience.
Okay, so we've established the whale timeline and the weather timeline. But how does the dark sky factor into this? Do the stars care if it's raining?
Well, the lack of light pollution is a permanent fixture. As long as the island exists, the nearest significant source of artificial light remains in Samoa, over 400 kilometers away.
That's a long way.
It is. But ground-level weather absolutely dictates visibility. You cannot stargaze through a tropical rainstorm.
Right, obviously. So to actually see this world-class sky, you need the dry season. But the moon must ruin it too, right? If you have a bright full moon, it doesn't matter how dark the ground is.
Exactly. The astronomical sweet spot requires aligning the dry season with the lunar calendar. Specifically, you really want the new moon periods in August and September.
So no moon at all.
Right. When the moon is entirely absent from the sky, the true depth of the cosmos is revealed. You can see the core of the Milky Way, the Magellanic Clouds.
Wait, what are those?
They're actually dwarf galaxies outside our own.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and you can see the Omega Centauri cluster.
Yeah.
And all of this is visible to the naked eye.
Okay, so this brings us to what I call the golden overlap, late July and August.
Yes.
You have the whales actively nursing in the water during the day, the trade winds are keeping the humidity down, and the new moon is revealing dwarf galaxies at night.
It's the perfect storm of good conditions.
But let's be real about what that means for a traveler trying to book this. If this is undeniably the best time to go, how fierce is the competition?
Well, the sources indicate that this specific late July to August window is already booking out first for the 2026 and 2027 seasons.
That's years in advance.
It is. But we must recontextualize what competition actually means here. In 2024, Niue received a total of roughly 5,500 visitors for the entire year.
Wait, for the whole year? There are cruise ships that hold more people than that.
To put it in perspective, the island of Bali receives more tourists in a single hour than Niue does in 12 months.
1 hour in Bali equals a year in Niue. That is an absolutely absurd metric.
Right. It changes the psychological nature of the trip. When you are actually on the island, you never experience crowding. There's no queue for a restaurant, no fighting for a spot at the tidal pools.
So where is the competition?
The competition all happens a year in advance, sitting at your laptop, fighting a small pool of highly informed travelers for a reservation.
Okay, let's assume the listener wins that fight. They secured the golden overlap, they endured the Auckland bottleneck. What actually happens when the plane touches down at Hainan International Airport?
It's interesting.
Because from what I gather, the arrival is a really jarring sensory reset.
It forces an immediate recalibration. If you are flying in from a hyper-connected, fast-paced environment, the total lack of standard infrastructure hits you the moment you step onto the tarmac.
Yeah, I read that you cannot just walk out of the terminal and hail a cab or open an app.
Definitely not.
In fact, the tourism board has a strict mandate. You are not allowed to arrive without confirmed accommodation, and you must pre-arrange your airport transfer.
It's mandatory.
The properties usually send a van for you, which runs about $15 to $25 USD each way, unless it's bundled into your room rate. But if you just show up hoping to figure it out, you are stranded at the airstrip.
And the drive from the airport to the main settlement, the capital of Olofi, takes about 10 minutes. It's a very swift introduction to the functional reality of the island.
Because Alofi isn't exactly a metropolis.
No, Olofi is not a bustling hub. It is a modest clifftop promenade looking directly out over the Pacific. There are a few essential shops, the government administration buildings, and a small market area.
And as you drive through, the topography immediately confirms what we discussed earlier. You look over the cliff and there's no sand.
Just rock.
It's just steep drops into deep blue water. If you want to swim, you are basically pulling over on the side of the road and taking these short, steep hikes down limestone to spots like the Avaiki Cave pool or the Limu Pools.
Exactly.
Which makes me wonder, how are you actually getting to these trailheads? You mentioned earlier there is zero public transport.
This is where a massive chunk of your daily budget gets locked in. A rental car is not an optional convenience. It is a fundamental survival tool.
You have to have one.
You do. You have to budget $60 to $90 USD per day for a vehicle, and you specifically need a basic 4WD.
Why a 4WD for such a tiny island?
Because the access roads to the best chasms and forest trails are unpaved. They are cut directly into the rough, crushed coral limestone.
Ouch.
Yeah. A standard compact car will struggle immensely and likely sustain damage. And there's a secondary logistical hurdle tied to the driving.
Let me guess. Gas.
Right. There is exactly one fuel station on the entire island, and it is located back in Alofi.
So you can't just drive aimlessly. If you head to the far side of the island and realize your tank is low, you are in serious trouble.
You really are.
The phrase from the sources that perfectly summarizes this vibe is functional rather than polished.
Yeah.
The island is not a sanitized resort bubble tailored to pamper you.
And that lack of polish applies heavily to the single biggest bottleneck of the trip, which is the accommodation, the 50 rooms.
Right, the make or break factor.
This is the make or break factor for anyone planning a visit.
Let's analyze the options, assuming you can even get one of those rooms. If a listener wants a traditional vacation where they don't have to think about logistics, they're looking at the resort tier, right?
Right. The flagship property, and really the only entity that fits the traditional definition of a resort, is the Scenic Matavai.
Okay.
It is perched on a clifftop outside Alofi. It has a pool, an in-house restaurant, a bar, and those expansive ocean views.
And the financial damage for that convenience.
It ranges from $180 to $280 USD per night, depending on the room class and season.
That's actually not terribly high for a resort.
It isn't, but again, the price is secondary to the scarcity. Because it offers the least amount of friction, it sells out first. For the July to September peak, you must secure a room at least 6 months in advance.
Wow. What if you miss that window, or you simply refuse to pay $280 a night?
You drop down to the villas and holiday homes tier. These are independent properties scattered around the villages or along the coast, costing between $100 and $180 USD per night for a 1 or 2 bedroom setup.
Any specific examples?
The new village accommodation is a good benchmark here, but the most critical asset these properties offer isn't the bedroom, it's the full kitchen.
Yes. The ability to cook. We're going to dig into the food supply chain in a minute, but having a stove is a massive tactical advantage.
Absolutely.
If you don't need a whole house, but you want to step above basic, where do you go?
The mid-tier lodges, places like the Fatahega Guest House, operate in the $90 to $130 USD per night range. They usually include breakfast.
This sounds reasonable.
It is a strategic compromise for couples or solo travelers who need reliable comfort without absorbing the resort premium.
And at the absolute bottom of the pricing ladder.
The budget fails. These are basic traditional-style guest houses, like David's Fail in Alofi.
Yeah.
You pay between $60 and $95 USD per night.
So super budget friendly.
Yes, but the reduction in price comes with a reduction in modern guarantees. Air conditioning might not be available, relying instead on ocean breezes. You may be sharing a bathroom.
Right.
The upside is a much closer, genuine integration with the local Niuean hosts.
But the golden rule remains. If you wake up in April and decide you want to go to Niue in July, it does not matter which of these tiers you prefer.
It doesn't matter at all.
You will find absolute zero availability across the board. The island is functionally closed to spontaneous travel.
Which is a perfect segue into the daily mechanics of keeping yourself alive once you have secured a bed. Food, groceries, and local etiquette.
I am so fascinated by the supply chain mechanics here. If you are on an island with virtually no arable land for mass agriculture, no global fast food chains, and no delivery apps, where does the food actually come from?
It comes from the exact same place the tourists come from. The airport.
No way.
Yes. The food culture and survival of the island are entirely dependent on a logistical umbilical cord. Those 2 weekly Air New Zealand flights are not just passenger jets. They are the island's primary fresh produce delivery system.
That is wild. The luggage hold is literally stocking the grocery shelf.
Literally.
Which brings us to the epicenter of survival in Alofi Swanson's supermarket. This is the only major grocery store, and its shelves are mostly dominated by imported goods from New Zealand.
Right.
And because every single item had to be flown or shipped over thousands of miles of ocean, the sticker shock is severe.
Extremely severe. Let's break down the prices, keeping in mind that the local currency is the New Zealand dollar, trading at roughly $1.68 NZD to $1 USD.
Okay.
A standard loaf of imported bread is going to cost you $4 to $5 USD. A dozen eggs sits at $6 USD. A 1.5-liter bottle of drinking water is $2.50 USD.
$6 for eggs. I have to ask, why wouldn't you just eat at restaurants if a loaf of bread costs $5?
Well, because the restaurants operate under the exact same imported supply chain. Plus, they have to factor in labor and energy costs from a diesel-powered electrical grid.
Oh, true.
So a mid-range meal for 2 at a local spot in the Lo-Fi will run about 36 to 48 USD. A basic beer is $5 to $7 USD. And if you dine at the Scenic Matavai Resort, expect to pay 25 to 45 USD per person for just a main course and a drink.
So if you are bleeding money at the supermarket and the resort, how do you eat without completely ruining your budget? You mentioned earlier that having a kitchen in a villa was a tactical advantage.
It is, provided you use what the sources identify as the market hack.
Oh, tell me about the hack.
You have to bypass the imported supply chain entirely and tap into the local ecosystem. Every Tuesday and Saturday morning, there is a village market. This is where local families sell goods they have grown or caught themselves.
What are we talking about in terms of food and price here?
You can buy authentic, ready-to-eat local staples. Things like kopitu, omu cooked taro, and freshly speared reef fish.
Yum.
Because you are removing the aviation fuel costs and the corporate markups, you can secure a massive fresh meal for just $5 to $12 USD per dish.
That's a huge saving.
It's economically vital, and it is a far more genuine cultural interaction.
But tapping into the local culture requires adhering to their rules. And there is one rule that every source highlights as an absolute minefield for tourists: the Sunday etiquette.
Niue is a profoundly Christian community, and their observance of Sunday is non-negotiable. It is a strict, systemic day of rest.
When you say systemic, you mean the entire island just turns off? Like, if I'm a tourist used to grabbing a coffee and a pastry on a Sunday morning, what am I looking at?
You are looking at locked doors. Swanson's supermarket is closed. The vast majority of cafes and restaurants do not open, or they only open for a very brief window late in the day after church services have concluded.
Even the tours?
Even the tours. The ocean operators, the diving and whale swimming guides, they halt operations out of respect for the day.
This creates a terrifying logistical trap. Let's say I fly in on that Saturday afternoon Air New Zealand flight. I'm tired, I check into my villa, and I tell myself I'll just hit the grocery store tomorrow morning when I'm rested.
If you make that decision, you will wake up on Sunday with no food, no open stores, and no way to feed yourself unless your guest house happens to have leftover snacks.
That's a nightmare.
The rule is simple. If your flight lands on Saturday, your very first stop, before you even unpack your bags, must be Swanson's supermarket to stockpile provisions for the next 36 hours.
It demands a level of deliberate, militant planning that a lot of people just don't want to do on vacation.
Exactly.
So let's aggregate all these specific costs. The $6 eggs, the $90 rental cars, the $280 resort rooms. Let's build out the full, honest daily budgets for different types of listeners.
That's good.
Let's start with the backpacker profile. The sources peg this at $85 to $110 USD per day.
I will tell you right now, executing a trip on that budget requires exhausting discipline.
Why is it so hard?
The structural floor of expenses on Niue is incredibly high. There are no $15 hostel dorms. Your absolute cheapest bed is a basic fail at $65 to $90 USD a night.
So before you've even eaten or moved, your budget is almost gone. Let's do the math. Say you get a fail for $65. You buy Swanson's groceries to self-cater breakfast for $5 to $8. You hit the Tuesday market for a $10 local lunch. You stretch your budget for a $20 dinner at a local cafe. You are already at $103 USD. And we haven't even factored in transportation.
Exactly. You cannot walk to the chasms. You must have a vehicle. So you are forced to find another traveler to split the cost of a rental car, adding at least $30 to $45 USD to your daily overhead.
So what if you're alone?
If you are a solo backpacker, staying under $110 USD a day is functionally impossible. Niue's aggressively resist extreme budget travel.
So who is this island actually built for then?
The sweet spot, both economically and experientially, is the mid-range profile. This requires a budget of $155 to $200 USD per day per person.
Walk me through the mechanics of a mid-range day. Why does this work so much better?
Because it removes the daily anxiety of survival without paying exorbitant resort premiums. You are splitting a $90 to $130 mid-tier room or villa. You still self-cater your breakfast to protect your budget.
Smart.
But you can afford a $15 to $20 lunch at a cafe and a $35 to $55 dinner without stress. Crucially, you can absorb the $60 to $80 cost of a rental car on your own.
And it leaves room for the actual point of the trip, the activities. At that budget, you can comfortably afford one guided excursion a day, like a $50 to $90 caving or snorkeling tour.
Right. Now, if you scale up to the luxury or resort profile, the budget jumps to $250 to $350 USD per day, per person.
Let's examine what that premium actually buys you. You are paying $180 to $280 a night at the Scenic Matavai. You are eating all your meals at the resort.
Yes.
But the biggest differentiator is how you access the wildlife. A standard group whale swimming tour costs $90 to $120 USD. If you are in the luxury bracket, you bypass the group and book a private ocean charter for $150 to $200 USD per person.
And when you aggregate those costs over a standard 7-night stay for 2 people, including a few private charters and nice dinners, you're looking at a total land cost of $3,500 to $4,900 USD.
Which, if we are being honest, for a luxury week in the South Pacific with private whale encounters, is surprisingly competitive compared to places like Bora Bora.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, what about families? If a listener wants to bring a spouse and 2 kids for a week?
Based on the mid-range template, renting a villa, mixing groceries with a few restaurant dinners, and paying for group whale tours, a family of 4 will need to budget between $3,850 and $5,200 USD for 7 nights.
Wow.
And remember, that excludes the cost of 4 multi-leg flights.
It is a massive financial commitment, but there is one profile in the sources that I find absolutely fascinating because it completely shatters a modern travel myth: the digital nomad.
Ah, the work from paradise illusion.
Exactly. On paper, it sounds incredible. Rent a villa on a remote Pacific rock, open your laptop, and work remotely. The sources estimate a monthly nomad budget would be $2,800 to $3,500 USD.
Right.
But it's not the money that kills the dream, is it? It's the infrastructure.
The physical reality of the island simply rejects the digital nomad model.
Yeah.
You are relying on an internet connection that is beamed in via satellite or highly constrained submarine cables supported by a local power grid running on diesel generators.
So no Zoom calls.
None. You cannot maintain a reliable schedule of high-bandwidth video calls or massive data uploads. The infrastructure is simply too fragile.
And there is a harsh economic disparity here that travelers really need to understand. The sources highlight that the local Niue residents have a monthly living cost of about $490 USD.
True.
A digital nomad might look at that and think, great, I can live there for under $500 a month.
Which is a fundamental misunderstanding of local economics. That $490 cost of living is anchored in generational land ownership, non-commercial food sharing networks, and deep community infrastructure.
Things tourists don't have.
Right. As a visitor, you are entirely locked out of that ecosystem. You are forced to pay retail prices for everything. Your absolute baseline is that $2,800 figure.
The verdict on the digital nomad fantasy is a hard stop. Do not move to Niue to work. Go there for a maximum of 2 weeks, shut your laptop, and actually disconnect. Which brings us back to the logistics of executing a short-term trip. The sources identify 3 specific named logistics traps that have the potential to completely ruin a vacation if you aren't prepared.
We really need to analyze the mechanics of these traps, starting with trap number 1, the 2 flights per week problem.
Right.
We know the flights are restricted to Tuesdays and Saturdays, but we need to look at the cascading failure the constraint creates.
Yeah, it's not just a matter of having limited options for your departure day. The real danger is the bottleneck in Auckland. Let's say I'm flying from Chicago to Auckland to catch my Tuesday flight to Niue.
Okay.
But there's a storm over the Pacific, and my Chicago flight lands in Auckland 3 hours late. I miss the connection to Niue.
In any normal travel scenario, the airline simply puts you on the next flight out that afternoon.
Sure.
But because Air New Zealand only flies this route twice a week, missing that Tuesday flight means you are physically stranded in Auckland until Saturday.
You lose 4 entire days of your vacation sitting in an airport hotel in New Zealand. The financial and emotional damage of that is just catastrophic.
The fix is rigid. You must build a minimum 1-night buffer in Auckland, on both the outbound and return legs of your journey. Do not attempt a same-day connection.
That's solid advice.
Furthermore, you must purchase flexible fares, and your travel insurance policy must explicitly state that it covers missed connections on single routing itineraries. Standard insurance often will not cover a 4-day hotel stay for a missed flight.
Okay, trap number 2 is the Sunday shutdown, which we discussed. But the mechanism bears repeating because it catches so many people out.
It really does.
The fix is absolute. If you arrive on Saturday, your first hour on the island must be spent at Swansons supermarket securing food for Sunday. But there is a silver lining. If you fly in on the Tuesday flight, you have 5 full days to figure out your food supply before Sunday hits.
Very true.
Yeah.
Trap number 3 is perhaps the most physically dangerous for a traveler's budget and schedule. The rental car is non-negotiable, but driving is not obvious.
The mechanism here is a combination of massive distances and hostile terrain. You might look at a map of a 259 square kilometer island and think, I'm in decent shape, I'll just walk or rent a bicycle.
Which is a severe miscalculation of tropical humidity and geography.
Really?
Oh yes. To reach the Togo Chasm or the Huvalu Forest, you are traversing long, unshaded stretches of island. And walking on uneven, crushed limestone tracks is grueling. You must drive. But the driving itself introduces a new hazard.
Right, because the roads to the trailheads are not paved. They are made of crushed coral. As we established, coral limestone is jagged and razor sharp.
Like glass.
It acts like sandpaper on rubber. It literally shreds rental car tires.
The fix requires a 3-part strategy. First, accept the $60 to $90 USD daily car rental costs immediately in your budgeting. Second, find someone at your guest house to split the cost with if you are traveling solo.
And the third?
Third, and most importantly, purchase the supplemental tire damage insurance from the rental agency. Do not decline the tire cover. You are highly likely to suffer a puncture.
If the roads are that hostile, it begs a broader question about safety in general. If I'm out on these remote tire-shredding tracks, how safe am I actually?
We have to divide safety into 2 distinct categories: the human environment versus the natural environment. From a human perspective, crime is virtually non-existent.
That's reassuring.
In a tight-knit community of 1,500 people, anonymity does not exist. The social fabric is incredibly strong. You are not going to be mugged or pickpocketed.
It is exceptionally safe for solo travelers, particularly solo female travelers. The local culture is deeply welcoming, but the financial penalty for traveling solo is steep.
Right.
Because you are absorbing the full cost of the per-room accommodation rates and the mandatory rental car without a partner to split it.
But while the human environment is benign, the natural environment demands absolute, uncompromising respect. The geological hazards are severe.
We are talking about ocean surges, right?
Yes. The chasms and sea caves are connected directly to the deep Pacific. A sudden, powerful wave surge can funnel into a cave with terrifying force.
That sounds incredibly dangerous.
It is. If you are knocked over, you are falling onto razor-sharp coral. A simple scrape can quickly turn into a severe tropical infection.
The safety rules from the tourism board are clear. You never enter the sea caves alone. You always adhere to the local flag system posted at the coastal access points.
Always.
If a red flag is flying, indicating dangerous swell conditions, you do not enter the water. Period.
Yeah.
No photo is worth the risk.
This respect for the environment must also extend to the wildlife, which brings up a very specific ethical and safety trap: the unofficial tour scam.
I saw this in the sources. Because the official group whale tours cost $90 to $120 USD, some travelers try to save money by paying a local fisherman half that price to take them out in a small boat.
Yes.
Why is that a catastrophic idea?
First, from a pure safety standpoint, informal operators often lack the necessary open ocean safety gear and communication equipment required if a swimmer gets into trouble in deep water.
That makes sense.
But more importantly, there are strict marine interaction laws governing how humans approach humpback whales. Unofficial operators frequently violate these rules to guarantee their clients a close encounter.
So they chase the waves down, or they crowd a mother and calf, which is incredibly dangerous for the swimmers and deeply disruptive to the animals.
Precisely.
The rule of thumb is unyielding. Only book water activities through officially licensed operators vetted by New Tourism.
So we have outlined the shredded tires, the 4-day flight delays, the expensive eggs, and the sharp coral. We have to ask the ultimate question.
The is it worth it question.
Exactly. What on earth compels people to endure these brutal logistical hurdles? What is the payoff?
The payoff comes in 3 unmatched world-class highs. Let's start with the pinnacle, the whales. I want to explain the mechanics of how this interaction actually works, because it's not what you see at a marine park.
The licensed operators use a methodology called float and wait.
Right. You don't jump into the water and swim aggressively toward a 40-ton animal. The boat drops you in the water a safe distance away, and you simply float. You wait.
It's very passive.
Very. Humpback whales are highly intelligent, naturally curious creatures. If they feel unthreatened, they will often initiate the interaction.
It's incredible.
Imagine floating in water that has 60 meters of crystalline visibility. It's an endless, deep blue void. And slowly, out of the depths, a massive humpback whale rises up. It surfaces 3 meters away from you.
Wow.
You are looking directly into the eye of an apex marine mammal in its own territory. It is an evolutionary, almost spiritual marvel that you paid $100 to experience.
It really is the absolute zenith of wildlife tourism. And when the sun sets, you transition to the second major high, the dark sky.
And again, it's about the mechanics of visibility. Because there is no ambient light pollution reflecting off moisture in the atmosphere, the sky gains three-dimensional structure.
It's not just flat.
Exactly. You aren't just looking at flat, twinkling dots. You are seeing the dense, textured dust lanes of the Milky Way core. You are seeing the Magellanic Clouds clearly defined as separate galactic bodies.
It's unparalleled.
It is a level of astronomical clarity that most inhabitants of the Northern Hemisphere have never witnessed with their own eyes.
The third major high is terrestrial, and it highlights the bizarre geology we discussed earlier, the Togo Chasm.
Oh man, this sounds like a set from a science fiction movie. It's a free hike that takes about 2 to 3 hours round trip.
Quite a trek.
You walk across a jagged, exposed coral landscape that looks completely alien. Suddenly, the ground opens up into a deep crack in the plateau. You literally have to climb down a long wooden ladder into a hidden canyon.
Right.
The floor of the canyon is unexpectedly soft sand, and you are entirely surrounded by towering vertical limestone walls draped in the massive roots of banyan trees. You feel like you have descended into the center of the earth.
The dramatic nature of those highs is undeniable. But a rigorous deep dive requires us to balance them with the grounding lows. We need to look at the honest disappointments a traveler might face.
The first one is an expectation failure. The lack of sand. We explain the geology, but if a listener's brain simply demands a long, sweeping Cook Island-style beach where they can walk barefoot in the surf for a mile,
they will be disappointed.
They will be deeply disappointed. The Limu Pools are stunning, but they are rocky, enclosed swimming holes, not expansive beaches.
The second disappointment is food fatigue. We noted the reliance on the supply chain, but practically, there are only 4 to 6 restaurants operating on the island at any given time.
So you run out of options fast.
If you stay for more than a week, you are going to cycle through every menu item multiple times. Self-catering isn't just a budget tactic. It becomes a practical necessity simply to introduce variety into your diet.
And the third low is the technological isolation. We already dismantled the digital nomad fantasy, but even for a casual tourist wanting to upload photos or check emails, the inconsistent internet can be incredibly frustrating.
You really have to disconnect.
You have to actively surrender to the disconnection, or it will drive you crazy.
If a listener hears about the lack of beaches, the food fatigue, and the brutal flight logistics, and decides those constraints are deal breakers, what are the comparable alternatives in the Pacific?
Let's run the comparisons. First alternative, the Cook Islands, specifically Rarotonga or Aitutaki. What do the metrics look like?
Flights from Auckland to the Cook Islands are slightly more expensive, running $700 to $900 USD round trip. The mid-range accommodation is also a step up in price, sitting between $120 and $180 USD per night.
But look at the pros. You get exactly what your brain wants from a tropical vacation. Perfect, long, sandy beaches.
Right.
The logistics are incredibly smooth, multiple daily flights, easy connections from major hubs like Sydney. Aitutaki boasts one of the most spectacular lagoons on the planet.
However, the cons reflect the exact unique assets Niue possesses. In the Cook Islands, you cannot legally swim with humpback whales, and they do not have the dark sky designation.
You are trading rare access for predictable comfort.
Exactly.
What about Tonga? Specifically the Vava'u Island group in the north. This is the only other major destination in the Pacific known for humpback interactions.
Tonga presents a very compelling counteroffer. The flight costs are comparable at $600 to $850 USD round trip from Auckland. The accommodation spectrum is much wider, offering everything from $60 budget spots to $200 mid-tier lodges.
Okay, so more options.
The primary pro is that you get licensed, regulated humpback swimming in that exact same July to October window, supported by a more developed, robust tourism infrastructure.
But Tonga has its own cons. It lacks the verified dark sky accreditation. It does not have the wild, dramatic limestone chasms to hike through.
That's true.
And critically, because the tourism industry is larger, it lacks the extreme intimacy of a 1,500-person community. You are sharing the water with more boats.
This brings us to the culmination of all the data, the budgets, the hazards, and the highs. We need to render the final verdicts in the "is it worth it" matrix for each of our specific traveler profiles.
Let's lock in the answers. Profile 1, the backpacker. The verdict is a conditional yes.
We must heavily emphasize the conditional. The logistical barriers are brutal, and that $85 to $110 daily minimum is unyielding.
It really is.
To make this viable, a backpacker needs a total land budget of $1,500 to $1,800 USD for a week, excluding the cost of flights. It requires aggressive meal planning, cooking your own food, and the absolute necessity of finding someone to split the rental car.
But if they do all that,
If you possess that discipline, it delivers an unparalleled natural experience. You are accessing the same whales and the same cosmos that luxury travelers pay thousands for.
Profile 2, the mid-range traveler. The verdict here is a strong yes.
This is the destination's true sweet spot. A budget of $3,800 to $4,500 USD for 2 people for a week, including flights from Auckland, buys you total exclusivity.
It's the perfect balance.
You get comfortable villas, guided excursions, and absolutely zero tourist fatigue. You are not fighting crowds for a beach chair. It is an incredibly competitive value for an experience that simply cannot be replicated on a mass scale.
Profile 3, the family. The verdict is a conditional yes.
The condition rests entirely on the constitution of your children. This is not a drop the kids at the resort kids club vacation. It is a rugged physical environment.
Yeah, lots of sharp coral.
Exactly. If your kids are over 8 to 10 years old, if they are strong ocean swimmers, and if they are up for hiking down limestone chasms, this trip will permanently alter their worldview.
It sounds life-changing for a kid.
It is, but it requires a financial commitment of $3,800 to $5,200 USD, excluding flights. If your children are younger or require constant packaged entertainment, Niue is not the place.
Profile 4, the luxury traveler. The verdict is yes, but recalibrate.
The recalibration is vital. You are paying $4,500 to $6,500 USD per person, including flights. But you must understand that you are buying boutique exclusivity, not Maldives-style opulence.
So no overwater bungalows.
No, you are not getting a private butler or gold leaf desserts. You are getting a cliff-top ocean suite, private whale charters with expert guides, and astronomer-led tours of the galaxy. The luxury is the access to the untouched.
And finally, the digital nomad or the long-term solo traveler. The verdict is a definitive no for living, but a resounding yes for a 2-week decompression trip.
Totally agree.
You cannot overcome the fragile internet and high imported food costs to sustain a life there. But as a short-term reset to escape the modern world, it is sublime.
If we step back and view this entire analysis, it leaves us with a deeply provocative thought about the future of travel.
What's that?
We spend so much of our time evaluating destinations based on how efficiently they cater to us. We judge them on how many hotel rooms they can build, how fast their Wi-Fi networks are, and how perfectly they pave their roads to ensure our comfort.
We really do.
But Niue upends that entire paradigm. What if a destination's greatest, most valuable asset isn't what they can build to accommodate you, but the very fact that they cannot and will not change to fit mass tourism?
That's a great point.
The extreme fragility of their constraints is the exact mechanism that preserves the magic. It challenges the modern traveler to adapt to the destination rather than demanding the destination adapt to them.
If this gave you the honest verdict you needed, follow the show. New episodes drop every day.
That is the honest verdict from Phil and H.